Hey everybody, how we doing today? So today, I thought we would talk a little bit about Lake Elsinore, the lake itself specifically. Do you guys find it strange that a lake of any significant size, any big lake, there always seem to be stories lurking just beneath the surface of the lake about monsters and creatures. At least these stories never seem to be far behind the discovery of a large body of water. The part that I find somewhat interesting are these creatures. They always seem to exist in lakes that are either visited frequently or there's a population, around the lake, and there's never really any sightings where the lakes are somewhat more remote or hard to get to. And I think I know why, but we'll get to that in a minute. And I know what you're going to say, Ryan. Well, there's a reason. There's not very many sightings on the remote lakes because there's not very many people, and it kind of goes along the logic of if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Yes, it makes a sound. I point taken. But I find it fascinating that there always seems to be reports of fantastical creatures in populated areas. So I bet you know where this is basically going. Elsinore, Lake Elsinore, has such a tall tale. Now, as you all know, Lake Elsinore is the largest natural lake in the state of California. Take a look at this. I said take a look. Go ahead. See, that's a really big lake. It's the largest natural lake in California. Now, it was first known long ago as Laguna Grande by the Spanish explorers that first came through here. Well, came through. The Native Americans were already here, but they called it Laguna Grande. And I don't want to get into the rich history of Lake Elsinore, but it actually is a city. I think it celebrated its centennial in the late 1980s. It's been a city of some significance for some time. Maybe not as much now, but certainly through the years. The first stories, I guess we'll say, that they first started with the Native Americans, probably telling them to those Spanish explorers. Of the fantastical beast that lived in the lake. Now, the Native Americans out here, that would have been Temescal Valley, so probably the Pechanga tribe or Pechanga, a group of Native Americans. That's who was in the region. But the first recorded account happened in 1884. And some cat reported seeing a creature that was scaled, had a very large neck. Certainly not the most descriptive of descriptions, but who knows, 1884 was a long time ago. Maybe some of his account was lost in time. But the Elsinore sea monster would be firmly cemented into the public consciousness around 1934. A rancher named C.B Greenstreet and his family reported seeing a creature that was 100 feet long with a 30-foot tail. 100 feet long! Can you imagine? Now, what I don't know is the creature from head to tail 100 feet, and he was able to designate the tail as being 30% of the 100 feet, or was it actually 130 feet and I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter. That's one big ass serpent. I'm assuming it would have a couple of humps, right? Well, this story was so convincing. The sighting was actually was actually printed in the Modesto Bee. The Modesto Bee. Now, that is some legitimate, who can argue with the Modesto Bee, right? I think it was also printed in the News Herald too at the time. Now, about that time, somewhere in the 30s, which remember that because that's going to be interesting. 34. The name Elsie, the sea creature, was named Elsie. I'm sure it's no coincidence that the Loch Ness monster is named Nessie. So Elsie, it kind of connects Elsinore, Elsie, and we all know that the city of Elsinore was named after the play, or part of the Shakespearean play Hamlet. But Elsie, the name sort of took, and there was numerous sightings. I think another one that was recorded was in 1967. A family on a boat felt some bumps and reported the creature. 1970, a guy named Bonne reported the same thing, a bumping of the boat. But he described it as just a 12-foot creature, about 12 feet long. So, that's a far cry from the 100, 130 feet of the 1930s. Certainly more plausible, I suppose. And there have been significant sightings that have continued well into the early 90s. I think in 1993, same kind of thing. A cat on a kayak felt a nudge or a bump and claimed it was Elsie. And then in 1994, I think a fisherman claimed to actually have almost caught Elsie. He thought it was a log, but when Elsie reared her head and bit through the fishing line, he realized that was not a piece of driftwood. It was the famed sea creature of Lake Elsinore. So, now, since Elsinore is a well-populated city and we have a pretty decent sense of humor, I guess, as a society, back in 1988, 122-foot, sort of in honor, I'm sure, of Mr. Greenstreet and his family, 122-foot, 15-foot tall, 5-piece sculpture was created by this cat named Brian. I'm going to butcher his last name. Muka, I believe, and a lady named Jeanne Tanase, I think is how you say her name. Well, here, take a look. Here's what they made. So kind of cool. They launched it in the lake. I think in '88 it was during the centennial celebration. Everybody got very excited. I don't think it ended very well. I think it fell over. It had some problems, but Elsie still is kind of fun, right? But there's a couple of problems, with this whole story as a whole. First and foremost is there's wild water levels in Lake Elsinore. I mean, it evaporates faster. It gets damn hot. And it's a shallow lake. I think it's only at its deepest 26 feet before you hit mud, which is considerably deep in muck. But it's not a terribly deep lake. In fact, it's been completely dry a couple of times. I think the first time at least recorded was like in 1862 to 1865 or so. It was bone-ass dry. The second time was in the mid 30s. It didn't, it didn't really get filled back up until I think 38 or 39. This would have been just after Mr. Greenstreet's account back in 34. So I think it dried up in like 36, completely dry. Here, take a look at this picture. No, seriously, take a look. Right? So, the third drought was in the 50s. It lasted like 8 years, from like 52 to 60 or something like that. It was just flat ass dry. So you would think when the lake dried out at the bottom, there'd be a floundering sea creature, Elsie, going, help me, I'm out of water. But no, the naysayers are like, Ryan, of course, Elsie is a creature that can walk on land or survive not in the water. She just prefers to be in the water. So clearly as the lake level went down, she would just head to a cave, hide until the lake filled back up, even if it was years. No one's ever seen her when she's in the cave. We only see her when she's in the lake, of course. I don't really buy that. This a second possibility is there are there's a number of sulfur springs in the area. Perhaps some of these bumps on the boats and stuff were sulfur bubbles gurgling up. There are springs, and a big enough bubble could certainly make a boat bump, and you hear and think you see things that aren't there, I suppose. But to me, the most logical explanation is it's just a flights of fancy, right? The Native Americans, to get the explorers to come back, first describe a sea creature to get money from them, or rocks, or whatever they were getting at the time. And then later on, how do you get tourists to come to the lake? You talk about a sea creature. There hasn't been any sightings that I'm aware of in the last 30 years, but who knows? I've been wrong before. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting that even here in California, much like Loch Ness, Lake Elsinore, we have a sea monster named Elsie. Elsie! I thought it was kind of fun, just wanted to share. Anyway, in this world, when you could be anything you want, you be kind, you be humble, you be forgiving, you be melting snow, and remember, have a little fun. It's later than you think. Bye.